everybody, and welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. In today's review, I'm going to be taking a look at one of the latest releases as a part of the Big Finish main range, which is the 5th Doctor release, Time Apart, featuring 4 short stories, with Peter Davison as the 5th Doctor travelling alone. Now, this release is in fact one that I was rather surprised to see was a set of 4 short stories, because normally when I'm looking for a release like this in this format, it's normally under the And Other Stories title. And of course, much like Blood on Santa's Claw last year, in the later half of 2019, this time round Big Finish have decided to go with one singular title that kind of encompasses the general premise of all 4 stories throughout this release, because it follows on from the previous 5th Doctor trilogy, where we had Tegan, Nessa and Mark, and basically we had a little bit of a falling out at the end of that trilogy, and this release is kind of the continuation of that, seeing 4 different variations of the 5th Doctor, going around different periods throughout Earth's history, and generally having some fun sci-fi adventures. So I must admit, this format is one that takes a little bit of getting used to for me. I kind of feel like the Big Finish main range is solely for 2-hour stories, and I absolutely love the 2-hour stories when they are done right, because you can have some excellent narratives and excellent character developments, and a lot of the atmosphere can definitely jump off the page. However, with stories the likes of this, kind of fall under the risk of them being too fast-paced for their own good. However, I was kind of cautious going into this release, but excited to see what it was going to contain, because I didn't really know what to expect. So taking a look at the first story, we have Ghost Station, as written by Steve Lyons. Now, Steve Lyons has of course written a number of Big Finish audio dramas, stretching over the many years of Big Finish. Of course, the very popular Blood of the Daleks, featuring the 8th Doctor and Lucy Miller, and this story is an excellent way to start off the anthology, because it pretty much displays how you can use this format effectively, because we have a two-hander between Peter Davison and a character called Peter Meyer, as portrayed by Timothy Blaw. And basically the Doctor lands in an underground tube station within Berlin during the time of the Berlin Wall, and we're living in a very different form of Berlin, where you have that whole concept of freedom, and freedom just being over the border, and the people over the border can do virtually whatever they want with their lives. However, within the part of Berlin that Peter Meyer finds himself within, he has a life that is controlled almost by the state, and he has a job within this tube station trying to go around the security, making sure that everything's okay, and of course his daily life is seeing trains go past him throughout the tube and have people on them who have a sense of freedom. And it is a story that instantly I immersed myself within. I think the sound design in particular does feel rather claustrophobic, and to be honest, if this episode was given extra substance just to stretch it out to the 45-minute mark, I honestly think this episode would be a very good, effective story to see within new series Doctor Who, with the Doctor travelling alone, the likes of Sid Midnight within Doctor Who Series 4. The entire premise of the story is due to the Doctor and Peter Meyer finding a dead body, and initially Peter Meyer thinks that the Doctor has committed the murder because he's a random mysterious man that has appeared on the train track, and rather logically he blames him. However, throughout the rest of the story, the Doctor is kind of always one step ahead. He's trying to figure out what happened to this person, and I'm not going to spoil what is at the very end of the story, but it is a really powerful piece of writing. I think that Peter Davison does a very good job at performing it, but equally Steve Lyons has also done a very good job with writing it, because Peter Meyer as a character is very emotional, very real, and at the end of the story we kind of have quite a lot of doom and gloom, but also at the same time that sprinkling of hope in there as well, that something is on the horizon and you kind of have that choice to go towards it if you want. However, at the same time the current situation is very gloomy and dark, and I think that is, as I say, a perfect way to start off this release, and to be honest I found it really captivating and a really intriguing listen. Next up we have The Bridge Master, as written by Jacqueline Rayner, again a Doctor Who long-time writer who has wrote many Doctor Who stories over the many years, and The Bridge Master basically embraces one of those unusual things that we hear about that happens within history, and you kind of think, did people really do that? It's a little bit unusual, because this time round we have the creation of bridges within medieval England, and basically the measuring of shadows, and the first person to walk over the bridge, basically their shadow is given to the bridge, or a soul is given to the bridge, and a few weeks later they will eventually be found dead, and they are a bridge sacrifice, and you have the bridge master who is building these bridges around this medieval settlement and basically committing these sacrifices every so often. And it's an unusual story because the Doctor lands in the situation and he rather clearly thinks very little of this current bridge sacrifice. He thinks that it's absolutely ridiculous, and it's again something that these people do in historical times, which in reality means absolutely nothing. They're not going to die next week, they're not going to die the week after. It's just something to scare people, to ensure that people won't cross the bridge from another town so they can keep this security within their little settlement. However, as we soon find out throughout this story, once the Doctor himself becomes the main key element of a sacrifice, things start going downhill and the Doctor starts to feel a little bit ill, and the entirety of the duration is spent with Agatha, as portrayed by Kate Harbour. And we have this rather depressing plotline with her character where she has a rather grim life. The vast majority of her relatives have died, including her siblings and offspring, and it is one of those things where you kind of think, yes, living in this period was very difficult and very sad, and at the same time we have this possibility of somebody committing these unusual sacrifices simply just to create these bridges. And of course it ends up that there is an alien involvement throughout this story. I'm not really going to talk about what else happens because it's a very short episode, as I say, but it's one of those ones that I found quite enjoyable, and I like those twists between historical and sci-fi and kind of providing a reason for these historical events and giving a sci-fi twist to that. And we'll also see that a little bit later on within this release as well. I thought it was quite good, I thought it was enjoyable, however it wasn't as exciting as The Ghost Station for me. I thought it was a good story again to display Peter Davison's character as the 5th Doctor, because you have a moment at the end of the story that reminds me of the 10th and 11th Doctors, where they kind of give the moments when the 10th Doctor has those soppy eyes and he says, "I'm giving you a choice and you can either leave or I will stop you." All of that is something very 5th Doctor-y but also quite 10th Doctor-y in there, kind of the all-good character coming out, and if the character decides to not take that choice, the Doctor will indeed stop them. We get to see that throughout this story. I think it's a rather powerful moment with Peter Davison and rather enjoyable as well. The third story of the release is What Lurks Down Under, as written by Tommy Donbavand, and it's a rather sad story, not because the actual episode is sad, but because of the production behind it, because this entire release has been dedicated to Tommy Donbavand, because sadly he is no longer with us. He always wanted to write a Doctor Who serial, and sadly he never got to see the final production of this story, and it is very sad because this is one of the better episodes of the release. I think it's a really good story, and again, I could imagine this being a part of new series Doctor Who, because we have that whole concept in there of morals and kind of having this alien throughout the piece that you think to start with is the big grisly monster that you kind of expect to see within Doctor Who. However, it turns out that the monster is simply retaliating and trying to defend itself because of the actions of the humans, as we get to see the 5th Doctor land the TARDIS in the middle of the sea on a ship that has been travelling between England and Australia. Basically, the ship is full of criminals that have been convicted of various crimes throughout England, sometimes for rather serious crimes and other times for not so serious crimes that really wouldn't be prosecuted today, the likes of stealing a dress, as we get to see throughout this story, as we're introduced to a character called Mary Wade, as portrayed by Laura Eichman, and basically she becomes the 101 of a companion throughout this story because she's absolutely brilliant. I was really intrigued by Mary Wade as a character, and I didn't realise to start with that she is an actual historical figure, and I thought to start with that we were actually having the introduction of a brand new Doctor Who companion, because this story has all of the components that you would come to expect from a debut companion episode, the likes of Rose, the likes of the 11th Hour. They're being burdened with this person, and then throughout the story, when we come face to face with the monster, because it is on Earth, the Doctor leaves it up to the companion of the story to help the situation and to try and talk to the monster and to try and make them see sense, to try and, I suppose, prove herself to the Doctor, or prove himself. I suppose we've seen that throughout Doctor Who before. In fact, I think in the 8th Doctor series we had the debut of Mary Shelley, and then Mary Shelley went on to have a whole trilogy of adventures, and I thought that we were going to have a parallel of that, especially when I found out that Mary Wade was a historical figure. I am going to slightly spoil it here. Sadly, she doesn't become a member of the TARDIS team, but boy does she make a brilliant contribution to the story overall, a great character to balance the ideas of the 5th Doctor. I think that generally they work together very well, as we're introduced to a giant fish that is lurking under the sea, and basically it's a massive mother fish with lots of baby fish, and that's a shoal of fish, and she's trying to protect her children. However, the humans are coming along and stealing her children and of course fishing them and taking them away to eat, and basically we have this whole concept throughout the story of eating animals and the fact that these animals actually have feelings, and this is a mother trying to protect her children. And it's a rather sad story, and it kind of makes you twist your perspective on the monster of the piece and kind of how they are feeling about the situation, but also makes a monstrous side to the humans come out as well, because I think that Mary Wade kind of notices how bad the humans can be throughout this story, especially the fact that she's been convicted of stealing a dress and has been sent away to another country because of it, but also at the same time it's an atmospheric episode, of course being on a massive boat. We are also introduced to a doctor in this story as well, which is one of the only medical staff left over because all the others have been zombified due to something that basically takes over their mind, which again I won't spoil what that is, but overall it's an enjoyable story with lots of nice mysterious elements and definitely keeps you hooked for the entirety of the story's duration. The fourth and final story is Kate Thorman's The Dancing Plague, and to be honest it reminds me of why I'm initially a little bit sceptical of the short story format, because the whole idea of this story I really like. Again, it embraces that whole idea of the unusual, weird and wacky things that we have done in our history as the human race, and basically tries to attach a sense of logic to them by bringing in an alien and saying it's their fault, although this story doesn't do that, which is what I quite like. It kind of introduces the possible contribution of an alien, however at the same time leaves that mystery there of, is it the alien? Is it still the humans just acting weird? And it kind of leaves the listener up to decide themselves what truly happened. And the reason why I'm a little bit unsure about this story is because it encapsulates everything that I'm scared by when it comes to these releases, where they are simply too fast-paced. I do believe that this story ticks in at around 24 minutes long, meaning that this is probably the shortest ever episode that I've reviewed from Big Finish on the Host Productions, and I think that it's a good story, it's a lovely concept, but I just wanted to see more of it. I wanted to see the Fifth Doctor going around Strasbourg, interacting with, as they are referred to throughout this story, the common people, and talking to them about why are they dancing so much to the extent of exhaustion. Thorman does a very good job of, again, setting the atmosphere, setting the location, kind of representing that hierarchy in Strasbourg, and as well the hierarchy throughout the other stories as well. Them have been within these historical settings, and normally when you have a historical story, there is always a sense of hierarchy within the system and social class. I think that this episode does have a few good elements. As I say, I love the whole concept of the dancing plague, but it just simply goes too quickly. I like the fact that the Doctor throughout this story takes control. I think that it's another perfect example of how Peter Davison can really work effectively on Big Finish, because I do personally find his episodes on Big Finish rather captivating to listen to, because the Fifth Doctor is always so energetic, and because he's energetic, he's a Doctor that you kind of feel energetic listening to yourself. It's kind of a story that keeps you going constantly, and I think that is why the Fifth Doctor is always suited to having short stories, because throughout my times of reviewing Big Finish, I think since 2016, the vast majority of the short story releases have been Fifth Doctor ones. I think that the only exception is Blood on Santa's Claw last year, and I think that he just works well within the format. But as I say, for this one, the whole idea of the dancing plague is brilliant, but I just wanted more of it. I would have loved maybe an extra 10 minutes, 15 at most, just to pad it out, give it some more time to breathe, because it was a wonderful concept. I think that what Kate Thorman did right is excellent, and it does show a lot of potential, and it shows a story that you can instantly sink your teeth into, but I just wanted more of it, which I suppose can be something that can be said for the vast majority of the episodes throughout this release, the likes of Ghost Station. I feel like this one just needed something a little bit more, because it felt a little bit like an incomplete package. So with that, thank you very much for watching my review of the Fifth Doctor short story anthology release Time Apart. I really hope you have enjoyed it. Of course, there is a number of other Fifth Doctor stories coming out for the end of 2020, including a story with the Slovene, which I do believe is out now, as well as a number of Time War stories with the Daleks, which I do believe are also short story adventures, but I suppose all of them are coming in the next few months. So as always, thank you very much for watching. Do of course stay tuned on the Host Productions for brand new Doctor Who content, content each and every week, and of course regular Big Finish reviews. And on that note, I will of course see you all next time. Bye for now.